it's not exactly a safe neighborhood, and to go out at night, you kind of have to know the neighborhood, really watch her back, and I think it's unfortunate she probably didn't know what kind of neighborhood she was in.
Some cases refuse to stay buried. Some mysteries claw their way back to the surface, no matter how many years pile on top of them, no matter how many official reports get filed, no matter how many times the word closed gets stamped across a folder. The case of Elisa Lam is one of those mysteries. For over a decade, her story haunted the internet, lived in the shadows of YouTube comment sections, and whispered through true crime podcasts at 3 in the morning. And now, in 2025, new information has emerged that doesn't just add a footnote to this tragedy. It reframes the entire story from the beginning. But to understand where we are now, you have to understand where it all started. Elisa Lam was 21 years old when she disappeared. She was a Canadian university student from Vancouver, British Columbia, the daughter of hard-working Hong Kong immigrants who had built a quiet, dignified life in Canada. By all accounts, she was curious, warm, and deeply thoughtful. She maintained a Tumblr blog where she posted about books, fashion, cinema, and the complicated inner world that most people her age hadn't yet learned to articulate. She wrote openly about living with bipolar disorder and depression, not to draw sympathy, but because she believed in honesty. She was, in the truest sense, a young woman trying to figure out who she was and where she belonged in a world that often felt too loud and too fast. In late January 2013, she embarked on a solo trip along the California coast. It was meant to be an adventure, the kind of trip you take when you're 21 and feel like the world is finally opening up. She traveled through San Diego and eventually arrived in Los Angeles, checking into the Cecil Hotel on January 28. The Cecil was a budget hotel with a reputation that stretched back decades. Located on the edge of Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, it had been linked to multiple deaths over the years and had housed some of America's most disturbing criminal figures. It was not a place that inspired comfort. But for budget travelers, it was affordable and centrally located. Elisa checked in. She had no reason to think it would be the last place she ever stayed. Within 2 days, hotel staff moved her out of a shared room after her roommates complained about strange behavior. She was relocated to a private room on the 5th floor. On January 31st, she was seen alive for the last time, chatting cheerfully with a bookstore clerk nearby, buying books, wondering out loud if they'd be too heavy to carry for the rest of her trip. That evening, she was supposed to call her parents, as she had done nearly every night of her trip. The phone never rang. Her parents, David and Yina Lam, flew to Los Angeles and filed a missing persons report. The search began. For 19 days, Elisa Lam was simply gone. Police searched the hotel. Dogs were brought in. Her room showed no signs of struggle. There were no leads, no witnesses, no trace. Then, on February 14th, the Los Angeles Police Department released a piece of surveillance footage that would permanently change the nature of the case. The video, time-stamped February 1st, showed Elisa inside one of the hotel's elevators. What happened in that footage defied simple explanation. She pressed multiple floor buttons, retreated to the corner of the elevator, peered out into the hallway as if checking for someone, appeared to speak or gesture at something the camera could not see, and then stepped back out. The elevator doors, strangely, never closed while she stood there. Her movements were erratic, childlike in some moments, deeply unsettling in others. The footage went viral almost immediately. Within days, millions of people around the world were watching it and forming theories. 5 days later, on February 19th, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof of the Cecil Hotel to investigate complaints about the building's water supply. Guests had reported foul taste, discoloration, and low pressure. When he opened one of the rooftop water tanks and looked inside, he found Elisa. Her body was floating face up in the water, naked. Her clothing was found floating nearby. Also retrieved were her hotel room key and her wristwatch. The Los Angeles County coroner eventually ruled her death an accident, drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a contributing factor. The toxicology report found no drugs or alcohol in her system at levels that could have caused her death, though her prescribed medication levels were notably low, suggesting she may have stopped taking them. The official case was closed. But the questions were just beginning. How did she get onto the roof? The access doors were locked. The stairwells required staff key codes. Any unauthorized entry was supposed to trigger a security alarm. Investigators later suggested she may have used a fire escape accessible through a window, and indeed, her scent trail reportedly ended near one such window. How did she get into the water tank? The tanks were large industrial cylinders, roughly 4 feet by 8 feet, mounted on concrete blocks, with no built-in ladders. Maintenance workers required portable ladders to access them. The lids were heavy metal covers. When her body was found, the lid was open, but how she climbed in, and whether she climbed in alone, was never definitively resolved. Why did the police dogs that searched the hotel in early February, including the rooftop, fail to detect any sign of her? If she was already in that tank, why did trained animals find nothing? The autopsy report, which was made public in June 2013, raised more questions than it answered. Critics noted that it made no reference to the results of rape kit testing or fingernail evidence collection, and it was unclear whether those standard procedures had been properly carried out. The report noted subcutaneous blood pooling in Elisa's anal region and the presence of a prolapsed rectum, findings that some independent forensic observers found difficult to explain purely through decomposition. The coroner's team attributed these findings to the natural processes of a body submerged in water for an extended period, but the explanation did not sit comfortably with everyone who reviewed it. And then there was the hotel itself. The Cecil Hotel's history is a catalogue of horror that predates Elisa Lam by many decades. Since its construction in the 1920s, the building had been associated with suicides, overdoses, and violent crime. 2 of America's most notorious serial killers had stayed there. The surrounding neighborhood of Skid Row, one of the largest concentrations of unhoused individuals in the United States, created an environment where the vulnerable were consistently at risk. The hotel's management over the years had been repeatedly criticized for inadequate security, poor maintenance, and a culture of neglect that allowed dangerous situations to fester undetected. In the years following Elisa's death, investigative journalists and true crime researchers began piecing together a more troubling picture of the Cecil at the time of her stay. Multiple former staff members, speaking anonymously in various documentaries and online investigations, described a hotel culture in which residents and guests were frequently left unsupervised, where security footage was inconsistently monitored, and where management prioritized avoiding bad publicity over cooperating transparently with investigators. The 2021 Netflix docuseries, Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, brought some of this testimony to a mainstream audience, but many researchers felt the series only scratched the surface of what was actually known. Now, in 2025, the picture has shifted again. Investigative work compiled by independent researchers and journalists in the past year has brought renewed scrutiny to several elements of the original investigation that were never publicly resolved. Among the most significant is the question of the surveillance footage itself. The footage released by the LAPD in February 2013 was widely noted to have been time-stamped incorrectly. The metadata on the elevator video appeared to reflect a time delay that investigators never fully explained. Security professionals who reviewed the footage at the time pointed out that the elevator door's behavior was inconsistent with normal mechanical function, suggesting either a technical malfunction or possible tampering with the recording. These anomalies were acknowledged in early reporting but were largely set aside as the case moved forward. Additionally, the question of who had access to the hotel's security system and how thoroughly that access was audited during the investigation has resurfaced. Former employees, in recent interviews and social media disclosures, have indicated that the Cecil Hotel security infrastructure in early 2013 was poorly maintained and that access logs, which would have shown who entered restricted areas like the stairwells leading to the roof, were either incomplete or were never properly secured as evidence. If accurate, this represents a significant failure in the early stages of the investigation. The low levels of psychiatric medication found in Elisa's system also carry new weight in light of recent clinical research. Studies published in the last several years on bipolar disorder and the neurological effects of sudden medication discontinuation have provided a clearer framework for understanding what Elisa may have experienced in her final days. When someone with bipolar disorder abruptly stops taking mood stabilizers and antidepressants, the resulting neurochemical disruption can produce severe manic episodes with psychotic features, including paranoia, disorientation, visual disturbances, and dramatically impaired judgment. Viewed through this clinical lens, the behavior captured in the elevator footage becomes not supernatural or criminal, but deeply, heartbreakingly human. A young woman in the grip of a psychiatric crisis, alone in a strange city, in a building with virtually no support infrastructure for someone in her condition. That does not close the case. It offers a partial explanation for her state of mind. It does not explain how she reached the roof. It does not explain the anomalies in the evidence. And it does not answer the deeper questions about whether the systems that were supposed to protect her, the hotel security, the LAPD's investigative procedures, the coroner's process, actually functioned the way they were supposed to. What 2025 has made undeniable is this: Elisa Lam did not simply slip through the cracks. She fell through a series of institutional failures, each one compounding the last. A hotel with a documented history of neglect and inadequate security. An investigation that left critical physical evidence either uncollected or unanalyzed. A coroner's ruling that was issued with unusual speed and unusual brevity. A public narrative that was shaped more by viral speculation than by rigorous accountability. And behind all of it, a young woman whose mental health struggles were known and documented, who was traveling alone, and who had no one in that building looking out for her. That is the truth that has finally surfaced. Not a conspiracy. Not a supernatural explanation. Something in many ways more disturbing than either of those things. A system that failed a vulnerable person at every possible turn, and then closed the book before the full story could be told. Elisa Lam deserved better. She deserved a complete investigation, a transparent autopsy, a thorough accounting of every failure that contributed to her death. Her family deserved answers, not assumptions. And the public, which has spent over a decade speculating in the absence of real information, deserved honesty from the institutions that were supposed to provide it. Her Tumblr page is still out there. Her words are still there. A young woman writing about books and films and the experience of being alive, of being uncertain, of hoping for something better just around the corner. She was not a mystery. She was not a horror story. She was a person. And in 2025, more than 12 years after she disappeared, the least we can do is remember her that way, and keep demanding the full truth that she and her family were never given.